Chapter 1. The tiredness that has no name. There is a kind of tiredness that sleep does not fix. You wake up. The alarm goes off. And before you have even opened your eyes fully, you already feel it sitting there. A weight, not on your body, but somewhere inside it. Somewhere you cannot quite point to. You had a full night of rest. You did everything right. And still, you scroll through your phone. 3 messages already. Someone needs something. Someone needs you to weigh in, to respond, to hold them up. And you do. You type back. Because that is what you do. You show up. You have always shown up. For your friends when they fall apart at 2 a.m., for your family who calls when the tension gets too thick and they need a calm voice, for your co-workers when a project is unraveling. You are the person people call, the one who picks up, the one who does not let it go to voicemail. And somewhere in the years that built this habit, something happened that nobody named. You became so practiced at showing up for others that the question of showing up for yourself stopped occurring to you entirely. Not because you forgot, because asking it felt like something you were not allowed to do. You have been taught to believe that being needed is the same as being loved, that being present is the same as mattering, that the person who always answers is the person who cannot be replaced. And so you answer. You always answer. You have built a life around the speed of your response, and somewhere in that building, you stopped asking what it was costing you. Not because you were foolish, but because the cost was invisible, paid in a currency so quiet you did not realize you were spending it until the account was almost gone. And somewhere inside that, there is something you have not let yourself say out loud. That you are tired, not of people, not even of helping, but tired of something you cannot name yet. A tiredness that lives underneath all the doing, that watches you move through your days being necessary to everyone around you, and quietly asks a question you keep postponing. When is someone going to show up for me? You do not say this. Maybe you have never said it to anyone. Because saying it out loud would mean something. It would mean you are asking for something, and you are not sure you are allowed to ask. You were taught, somewhere along the way, that need is inconvenient, that wanting is a kind of imposition, that the highest version of yourself is the version that requires nothing. And so you folded that part of yourself quietly away and kept going, kept answering, kept being there. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying what happens to a person when they live entirely in service of a role. Not a bad role, not an unhappy life, but a life built so completely around what others needed that the person inside the role slowly became invisible, even to themselves. He called the energy that runs a human life the force that moves you, motivates you, connects you to meaning psychic energy. And he noticed something that most people never realize until it is almost too late. Psychic energy does not disappear, but it can be drained, quietly, over years, slowly enough that you do not notice it happening until one morning you wake up and the tiredness is just there, sitting on your chest, and sleep has nothing to do with it. Chapter 2. How you became the person everyone calls it. It did not happen all at once. Nobody sat you down one day and taught you to be always available. Nobody handed you a rule that said, you must be reachable, you must respond, you must hold the space for everyone who needs you. It happened in smaller moments, in a house where being calm was praised and falling apart was not, in a classroom where you noticed that helping others made you matter in a way that nothing else did, in a friendship where you became the listener and realized that being the listener meant being needed, and being needed meant being safe. There is something Jung understood about these early patterns that most psychology tries to simplify too quickly. He did not say these patterns were wrong. He said they were adaptive, that they emerged because, at some point in your development, they worked. They got you something real, something you needed. The problem is not that you learned to give. The problem is that the giving gradually stopped being a choice and became a reflex, a way of operating so deeply embedded that you no longer notice it happening. Jung did not see this as a flaw. He did not call it weakness. He understood it as the beginning of a mask, what he named the persona. The persona is not deception. It is the face we learn to wear because the world responded well to it. Because at some point being available worked. It earned you love. It earned you belonging. It made you feel that you had a place, and so you kept wearing it. The problem is not the mask itself. The problem is what happens when you wear it so long, so consistently, that you forget it is a mask at all. When the face you show the world begins to replace the face that is actually yours. Think for a moment about how you describe yourself to someone new. The words come quickly, do they not? Reliable, supportive, good listener. Always there. These are not bad words, but notice what is missing from that description. Notice what you leave out. Because the part of you that needs, that wants, that sometimes resents that part doesn't fit the role. And so it waits. In the background. Unnamed. Think about the last time someone asked you how you were doing. Really asked. What did you say? If you are honest, not the honest you perform for others, but the honest that sits alone with you at the end of the day, there is probably a version of you underneath the answer you gave. A version that is not fine, not okay, not managing. A version that is actually quite tired of pretending that it is. That version is not dramatic, not broken, not asking for anything excessive. It is simply the part of you that has been waiting patiently for years for someone to create enough space for it to exist. The strange thing about always being available to others is that it makes you unavailable to yourself. And most people do not realize how long that has been true until something creates an unexpected gap. A moment of stillness. A night when everyone else is asleep and there is nothing left to manage. And in that gap, something rises, something quiet and unfamiliar, the sound of your own interior, a voice you have not listened to in a very long time. Here is what Jung observed in person after person who came to him exhausted by their own life, without understanding why. When a person becomes fully identified with their persona, fully inhabited by the role they play, their psychic energy stops flowing toward who they actually are. It all pours outward, into the role, into the relationships, into the endless maintenance of being needed. And the inner life, the real one, the one with desires and edges and things it needs, begins to quietly starve. Not loudly, nothing collapses. You keep going, you keep responding, you keep showing up. But something is happening underneath that you have not yet had the words for. Until now, perhaps. The persona was always meant to be a garment, not a skin, something you could take off. And if you have reached a point where taking it off feels impossible, where the idea of not being the reliable one, the available one, genuinely frightens you, then you are closer to what we are really talking about here than you might have thought. Chapter 3. What psychic energy actually is and where yours is going. Jung proposed something that most of us have never been taught, and that almost no one talks about in the way that it actually matters. He said the human psyche operates like a system of energy. Not metaphorically, he meant it structurally. The way a river system has a source, channels, tributaries, and places where water collects or stagnates the inner life of a person functions in a similar way. He called this life force, this total interior energy available to you, libido. Not in the narrow way that word later came to be used. He meant the full vital energy of a human being. The energy that makes you curious. The energy that moves you toward meaning. The energy that drives you toward what wants to live through you. And this energy is not infinite. It is real, and it is limited. Every emotional response you make, every act of showing up, every managed conversation and absorbed attention costs something from this reserve. Not punishment, just the basic arithmetic of a finite system. Now think about your own life for a moment. Think about a typical Tuesday, or a typical Thursday, one of those ordinary days that does not stand out in memory. Where does your energy go? You answer the messages. You manage the situation at work that needs managing. You check in on the friend going through the hard thing. You anticipate what your partner needs before they ask. You are the one who notices when the mood shifts in a room and quietly adjusts the atmosphere so that everyone stays comfortable. You absorb other people's anxiety so that they do not have to carry it alone. And at the end of that day, what is left, if you are honest? What is actually left of you, for you? The answer, for most people living this pattern, is very little. And the honest ones will admit this has been true for longer than they want to say. That they have been operating on something that functions like energy, but is not quite the same thing. A kind of performance of functioning. Going through the motions of being present while internally running almost empty. Here is something most people discover only in retrospect. The things you stopped doing, the things you set aside to be available, were not trivial. They were the exact things that psychic energy was meant to flow toward. The creative project, the long solitary walk, the afternoon with no agenda, the book you kept meaning to finish. Each of these was not a luxury. Each was a channel through which the inner life could replenish itself. And you closed them one by one, quietly, in the name of being there for everyone else. And then you wondered why the well was low. Jung observed that when psychic energy moves exclusively outward, when it is spent entirely on maintaining relationships, performing the role, managing the perceptions of others, the inner world begins to dry up. Not all at once. Gradually. The way a well runs low in a long drought. You do not notice until one day you reach in and your hand comes back with almost nothing. He also observed something else, something harder to say. The people who drain the most energy from us are not always the difficult ones. They are not always the demanding ones, the angry ones, the obviously needy ones. Sometimes the greatest drain comes from the person who simply knows, without knowing they know, that you will always show up, that you can be counted on to fill the silence, to smooth the difficulty, to not need anything back. This is not a character judgment. Most of these people are not consciously exploiting you. They have simply learned what you have trained them to expect. And what a person learns to expect, they stop experiencing as a gift. They begin to experience it as a condition of reality, something they stop noticing until the day it changes. This is the thing about being always available that no one says clearly enough. It is not just that you give your energy away. It is that you train the people around you to expect it. And when a person has been trained to expect your availability, they stop experiencing it as a gift. They begin to experience it as a condition of reality, like oxygen. You do not feel grateful for oxygen when it is there. You only notice it when it is gone. And you have been oxygen for people who never once thought to ask whether you needed to breathe. Jung noticed something about this specific kind of exhaustion. He said it has a quality that distinguishes it from ordinary tiredness. Ordinary tiredness is cured by rest. But this kind, the exhaustion of a person who has been living entirely in the service of a role, cannot be fixed by sleep. Because what is depleted is not the body. It is the sense of self, the feeling of having an interior, of existing in a full and real way, not just as a function in other people's lives. Chapter 4. Why your availability is not entirely free. Now here is the part that is harder to sit with, not because it accuses you of something, but because it asks you to look at something about yourself that most people prefer to leave unexamined. Jung understood that we rarely do things for a single reason. The conscious reason, the one we tell ourselves and others, is almost never the whole story. Underneath every pattern of behavior, there is something the pattern is protecting. So when you ask yourself, why do I keep being so available? The surface answer is usually something generous. Because I care. Because I want to help. Because that is who I am. And that may be completely true. But it is likely not the only thing that is true. Jung called the unexamined portion of the psyche the shadow. Not evil, not malicious, simply the part we have not yet looked at clearly. And one of the most common things that lives in the shadow of the extremely generous, extremely available person is a quiet fear that has never been spoken aloud. Because underneath the genuine care, there is often something else. A fear, specifically. A quiet, persistent fear that if you stopped being this available, if you pulled back, if you said no, if you became harder to reach, something essential would disappear. Not just something in the relationship, something in you. The belonging, the sense of purpose, the feeling of being woven into the fabric of other people's lives in a way that makes you feel real. Your availability is not just generosity. It is also an answer to a question you have never stopped asking. If I am not useful, do I still matter? This question is not small. For many people, it is the question around which an entire life has been organized. And the answer that availability provides, yes, you matter, you are needed. People call you as real enough to feel like proof. Real enough to keep the pattern going long after the cost has become too high. Jung was not unkind about this. He understood it as the logical consequence of a psyche that never received a clearer answer to that foundational question. If no one taught you that you had inherent worth that existed before your usefulness, then you had to find another way to know that you were real. And giving is one of the most effective ways to feel real that a human being has access to. Jung used the term projection to describe something that operates in both directions. We project outward, we place our own unexamined material onto the people around us. But we also become the screen onto which others project. And when you are always available, always present, always the one who responds, you become a very convenient screen. People stop seeing you as a full and separate person. They see the role, the reliable one, the strong one, the one who handles things, and you let them. Because that role, as exhausting as it is, also does something for you. It gives you a clarity about your value that you are not sure you would have without it. This is not a flaw in your character. It is a very human thing. And it is the beginning of understanding why the pattern is so difficult to interrupt. Because interrupting it does not just mean changing what you do, It means sitting with the discomfort of not knowing, for a period, who you are when you are not the available one. It means tolerating the uncertainty of your own value before the role rushes in to provide its answer. And that uncertainty is not comfortable. It was not comfortable the first time, which is why you found the role in the first place. There is something Jung wrote that stayed with me for a long time after I first encountered it. He wrote that the most dangerous thing a person can do is to live their life performing the role so completely that they never discover what lies beneath it. Not because the role is bad, but because the life underneath it, the actual interior life with its actual desires and needs and questions, does not wait forever. It will find a way to make itself known. Through exhaustion, through illness, through a sudden hollow feeling in the middle of what should be a perfectly good day, through the strange grief that descends with no visible cause. The inner life is not patient forever. It simply becomes quieter and quieter until one day the quiet becomes a kind of absence that you cannot ignore. And what Jung understood, what makes his work still so quietly powerful, is that this absence is not a sign of breakdown. It is a signal, an intelligent signal from a part of yourself that has been waiting for decades to be included. Not to take over, not to dismantle everything, simply to be acknowledged, to be part of the conversation of your own life. Chapter 5. What happens when you begin to withdraw? There is a moment that some people describe, not always with those words where they begin, almost accidentally, to be less available. Maybe they got sick and could not respond for a few days. Maybe something happened that demanded their full interior attention. Maybe they simply forgot to check their phone for an afternoon and discovered, to their surprise, that the world did not fall apart. And in that small window of not being there, something strange happened. They noticed what the availability had been covering up. A silence they had not heard in years. Something they had been wanting to do or say or feel that had been waiting patiently in the margin of their life. A version of themselves they had not visited in so long that it felt almost foreign. But also, and this is the part that requires the most honesty, they noticed something about the people around them. They noticed who reached out with genuine concern, and who reached out because the service had been interrupted. Two very different things, but invisible to each other for years, because the availability had never created a gap long enough for the difference to become visible. Jung called this the first movement of what he named individuation. Individuation is the long process of becoming as fully as possible who you actually are. Not the person the role requires you to be, not the person that other people's expectations have shaped, but the living, specific, irreducible person underneath all of that. And he was clear that this process cannot begin while you are still completely occupied by the persona. Something has to create a gap, a space, a moment where the performing stops and the listening can begin. He did not mean a dramatic rupture. He did not mean running away from your life. He meant something smaller and stranger than that. He meant the choice, conscious or half-conscious, to occasionally stop filling the silence, to let the space be empty, to see what rises when you are not busy managing everything. What rises is not always comfortable. Sometimes it is grief for a version of yourself you gave up so long ago you had forgotten it existed. Sometimes it is anger that needs only to be acknowledged. Sometimes it is something much quieter, a preference, a desire, something small and specific that is simply yours. And here is what most people discover when they create that space for the first time in a long time. The people around them react. Not always badly, but noticeably. There is a slight disorientation in others when the always available person becomes occasionally unavailable. A reaching, a gentle pressure to return to the previous arrangement. This reaction is not proof that those people are selfish or manipulative. Usually they are not. They are simply revealing something that was previously invisible, how dependent they had become on your predictability, how much of the emotional architecture of the relationship had been built on the assumption that you would always be there to hold it up. Seeing this is not comfortable, but it is important, because you cannot make a real choice about how to show up, and for whom, and how much while you are still invisible to yourself. And there is something else that happens in that space, a very old part of you, the part that was there before the role, before the training begins to stir. It does not announce itself. It does not make demands. It simply becomes slightly more present, like a fire that had been burning very low for a very long time, given just a small addition of air. Jung wrote about the concept of enantiodromia, the tendency of things that have been pushed to an extreme to eventually reverse into their opposite. When a person has been entirely extroverted in their energy pouring everything outward into relationships and roles and responsibilities, there comes a point where the psyche begins to pull in the other direction, where the inner world, long neglected, begins to exert a gravity of its own. This is not a breakdown. It is a correction. The tiredness you feel is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that your interior self has been waiting for a very long time and is beginning to insist on being included in your life. That insistence is not comfortable, but it is not your enemy. It is, in fact, the beginning of one of the most important things that can happen to a person. The point at which the self you have been performing for others begins to make room for the self that was always there underneath. Not replacing it, but expanding the space, creating the conditions for a life that is both present in the world and present to yourself. Chapter 6. What you lose, what you find. There is no version of this that is painless. Jung never promised that. The people who came to him wanting a simple answer always had to sit with the fact that there was not one. When a person who has been always available begins to pull back even slightly, even gently, there is a real cost. Some relationships, which had been built entirely on that availability, will struggle. Some will not survive. Not because you have done something wrong, but because the relationship existed primarily in the space your constant giving had created. And without that, there is less there than anyone wanted to admit. This is a grief, a real one. Not a dramatic collapse, usually. More like watching something you thought was solid slowly reveal that it was lighter than it appeared. And here is the part that no one prepares you for. Some of those relationships will be long ones. People you have known for years. People you love. And the discovery that what you shared was more conditional than you believed is one of the quieter heartbreaks available to a human life. It does not shout. It settles. And you carry it for a while before it becomes something you can see clearly. And then there is the guilt. The guilt that arrives almost immediately when you begin to protect your energy, when you do not respond right away, when you say, "I cannot right now," when you let a call go unanswered, because you simply do not have anything to give in that moment. The guilt is old. It learned its lesson young. It tells you that you are being selfish, that you are letting people down, that the person you have always been would not do this. But here is something Jung understood. that the guilt does not. The person who gives from an empty place does not actually give. They perform giving, and the performance costs them everything while producing, in the end, much less than it appears to. You cannot genuinely meet someone else if there is no you present to do the meeting. The guilt will argue with this. It has had a long time to practice. But consider what it is actually defending. It is defending the arrangement. The one where you are always available, always giving, always the one who shows up. And if you examine that arrangement honestly, you may find it has been producing something less nourishing than it seemed. Not connection. Something that resembles connection, but functions more like dependency, which serves neither of you as well as it appeared to. What you find, on the other side of pulling back, not running, not disappearing, just becoming slightly less automatic in your availability, is something most people do not expect. You find that there were things you wanted, actual, specific things, not grand desires, often quite modest ones, an afternoon alone, a creative thing you used to do and stopped because there was never time, a conversation you have been wanting to have with yourself. You find that the inner life that had gone so quiet was not empty. It was just waiting. Like a room you had shut the door on years ago, and when you finally open it again, there is still furniture there, still things that belong to you. And you find this is the one that surprises people most, that you have more to offer when you are not offering everything. That the quality of your presence in the relationships that remain changes. That you become more genuinely there, because you have chosen to be there, not because the role required it. What you also find, perhaps most quietly, is that you had been confusing exhaustion with virtue. Somewhere in the conditioning that made you so available, you absorbed the idea that tiredness was proof of goodness. That the more depleted you were, the more you must have given. Untangling this sitting with the reality that genuine love does not require you to disappear, that real care is not the same as self-erasure, is some of the most important work available to a human life. Jung believed, and this is perhaps his most enduring observation about the second half of life, that what the first half builds, the second half is meant to examine. In the first half of a life, we construct the self we show the world. We build the persona. We develop competence and connection and identity. This is necessary work. It is not wrong. But there comes a point, and it does not follow a schedule. It arrives differently for each person, where the self that was built for the world begins to feel too small for the person inside it. That feeling is not a crisis, though it can feel like one. It is an invitation from the interior to a larger and more honest version of the life you are capable of living. And what I want to say here is that this invitation is not a rejection of everything you have built. It is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to become more of who you already are. To let the part of you that has been living in the margin finally move toward the center, which requires first that you stop filling every silence before it can tell you something. Chapter 7. What remains when you stop? There is a question that Jung believed every human life eventually arrives at. Not at the same age, not in the same form, but arrives at, inevitably, if a person lives long enough and honestly enough. The question is not about what you have accomplished, not about who needs you or what role you have played or how you will be remembered. The question is simpler and harder than any of that. What is actually alive in me? Not what is expected of me. Not what I have trained myself to be, but what is genuinely, specifically, irreducibly alive in me, beneath all the layers of performance and role and careful availability. This question is not asked once and answered. It is returned to again and again, over years, and each time it yields something different. A slightly more honest answer, a layer that was not visible the last time. It is a question you live with, not one you solve, and the living with it is itself the work. Most people never get to that question because they are too busy answering everyone else's. The phone buzzes. Someone needs something. There is always something to manage, someone to hold, a situation that would unravel without your presence. And so the question waits, in the margin, in the quiet moments that you fill before they can fill themselves with something uncomfortable. The question is patient, but it is there, and it has been there for longer than you think. There is a particular courage required to stop filling the silence, because the silence does not stay empty. Something moves into it. And for a person who has not spent time in their own interior in years, what moves in can feel overwhelming at first. Not dangerous, but unfamiliar, like walking into a house you grew up in that has been empty for a long time. The proportions are different from how you remembered. The light falls at unexpected angles. There are rooms you had forgotten about entirely. You have to walk slowly. You have to let your eyes adjust. You cannot rush this kind of return. Jung wrote that a person who has never asked this question, who has moved through an entire life, defined entirely by what others needed them to be, has not exactly lived their life. They have lived a life adjacent to theirs, close to it, parallel to it, touching it at certain moments, but not quite inside it. This is not a tragedy. It is not a failure. It is simply what happens when the energy that was meant to flow in two directions, outward toward the world and inward toward the self, only ever flowed one way. And the remarkable thing, the thing Jung spent his entire career pointing toward, is that this can change at any age, in any life. Not easily, not quickly, but genuinely. He worked with people in their 50s and 60s who were encountering their own interior for what felt like the first time. And what he observed, consistently, was that it was never too late for this encounter to be meaningful. That the self that had been waiting was not diminished by having waited. It was simply there, with the same essential aliveness it had always had. Quieter, perhaps, more patient. But there. The first step is not a dramatic one. It is not a confrontation or a declaration or a rupture. It is not telling people you are done giving. It is not constructing walls. It is something quieter than that. It is simply the willingness to occasionally let there be silence where you used to fill the silence. To occasionally let a moment exist without managing it. To occasionally ask not of others, but of yourself, in a moment when you have not pre-answered the question, what do I actually want right now? Not what would be helpful, not what would make this situation easier, but what do I want? That question, returned to consistently over time, begins to do something to the energy. It begins, slowly, to call it home. And what comes home is not the same thing that left. It is something more integrated, something that has passed through the experience of giving and returned with a clearer sense of its own edges, of what it will offer freely and what it will offer only after consideration, of what it does not owe to anyone, and what it chooses freely and genuinely to bring into the lives of people it loves. That is not selfishness. That is the beginning of something that might, for the first time in a long time, actually be called a self. I want to leave you with something that is not an answer, because there is not an answer. Not one I could hand you that would actually be yours. But there is a question, and it is not a complicated one. When was the last time you were somewhere, really somewhere, not performing being somewhere just for yourself? Not because someone needed you there, not because it served a relationship or a role or a responsibility, but because something in you, something quiet and very old and very patient, wanted to be there. I am not asking what the answer is. I am only asking whether you remember that version of yourself. The one that wants things. The one that existed before you became so necessary to everyone around you. Because that version has not gone anywhere. It is still there. In the margin. In the quiet. Waiting for you to remember that this is where you begin. There is a phrase that Jung used toward the end of his career that I keep returning to. He said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were shaped to be, not who the role required you to be, but who you actually are underneath all of it. He called it a privilege because he knew it was not guaranteed. Because most people never get there. Not because they are incapable, but because the weight of the role is heavier than it appears, and the path back to oneself requires a kind of courage that no one ever quite prepares you for. The courage to disappoint, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to stop performing and simply be, which is, in the end, the hardest thing available to a human life, but also the most worthwhile. If any part of what was said here reached the part of you that has been quiet for a long time, that is not an accident. That part of you knows something. It has always known. It has simply been waiting for you to be still enough to listen. This is where you begin.